But yeah, I mean, should we get to this main story, Matt? The top line. I'm trying my best to be brief on this, even though like this.
David has been jumping up and down all day, saying we finally get to work to get Brandon's second term.
It's, this is like a tough one, and I'm trying not to be too blue. I've been feeling a little bit blue about the state of left politics lately, so trying to be optimistic. And like, look, it's no surprise that Biden's running. Like, let's be honest here, right? There's also no surprise that he's going to be doing the kind of things that he's going to be doing. It's no surprise, frankly, the way that Biden has been as the president of the United States since he was elected, right? This is all stuff that we knew going into it. But we got to talk about this because I think it does represent some very morbid symptoms in American politics. So earlier this morning, Joe Biden announced his presidential campaign. And I know earlier this morning, I don't know if you saw when he posted all these videos on social media, it was something like 4 a.m., which is pretty funny.
Just waking up, Grandpa?
I mean, well, there's something notable about this is that like there is this effort actually to almost like downplay his own announcement. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like very much formulaic. It's
Matter
just
of course.
Like sun rising. You know what I mean? It's sun rising and Joe Biden's running for president. So there's no real surprise at this point. It seems like Bernie's sidelined and Kamala Harris can't win. So the Democratic Party decided that Biden is sort of their vehicle. And he's going to take on RFK and Marianne Williamson in a primary that at this point seems like it's going to be a pretty cheap simulation of what a primary could and should look like. It looks like they're not going to have any kind of debate or real intention to treat it as a contest. And look, that shouldn't be surprising. One, because of what the Democratic Party is. And two, like if we're just being completely fair, it's not very typical to have brutal primaries within a party that has an incumbent president in our lifetime, right? That's not typical. The Democratic Party, you can't expect them to want to undermine themselves like that. But it is really telling that the Democratic Party isn't interested in any way, shape, or form in cultivating internal democracy. Because like, while you can maybe make that argument about this particular case, the attitude in 2020 was certainly, hey, we can't fuck around and have like a real open primary. We're not even going to commit to saying the person who gets the most votes in 2020 gets the nomination. And in 2016, as we know,
same thing, yeah.
Leaks and investigations, the Democratic Party did everything that they possibly could to stifle any kind of real democracy within that party.
Right.
The DNC's made their position extremely clear. That it finds any form of internal democracy a threat. Frankly, like the way a lot of liberals talk these days, they find any kind of criticism of the Democratic Party as a threat. And it's always, we can't do it now. They were saying that in 2015. They are saying it today. Seems like that's something that's going to be with us forever by design. But anyways, enough of me introducing it. Like, let's hear a little bit from the man.
And sorry, just a one note. It's not like, I mean, RFK, I have a problem with his anti-vax stuff. But fundamentally, these aren't like really bomb throwers. Like Marianne Williams,
even like, Marianne, yeah,
exactly. Like they're well within. Like again, besides the anti-vax thing, which is,
I mean, both of them are running campaigns that are saying we need to reclaim the soul of the Democratic Party, right? Which is like far from a barn burner,
right?
But let's hear a little bit from Joe and see how he's framing his campaign.
Freedom, personal freedom, is fundamental to who we are as Americans.
There's nothing more important, nothing more sacred.
That's been the work of my first term, to fight for our democracy.
This shouldn't be a red or blue issue.
To protect our rights, to make sure that everyone in this country is treated equally and that everyone is given a fair shot at making it. But you know, around the country, MAGA extremists are lining up to take on those bedrock freedoms, cutting Social Security that you paid for your entire life while cutting taxes for the very wealthy, dictating what health care decisions women can make, banning books, and telling people who they can love, all while making it more difficult for you to be able to vote.
I just to pause it there. I mean, I find it really annoying. Like, if you followed any of the voting, there were lots of Democrats who came into the Biden administration with high hopes and good faith hopes about what could be done to expand voting access in light of what is recognized in rhetoric by leaders of the party like Biden as a threat to democracy. And they did nothing. They sat on their ass and they said, we'll out organize voter suppression. That's literal headline. And so like to invoke that stuff is just like, look, I appreciate a Democrat hitting Republicans about Social Security. Like that's, you know, fair play to that stuff. And the abortion thing, of course, is a big animating issue. But I got to say, a fair shot is quite a, they give it away in this stuff, in these sort of like snippets. A fair shot is a big downgrade from a New Deal, for instance, right?
No, totally. And like, I don't know if we were going to play any more of it, but, we are.
We could play a little bit more. I don't know how you
there's
feel.
just like one thing that he says there, but no, totally. Like, and I'll just make this point here, like on abortion and on like, the thing is like, you know, I agree with Joe that like the far right mobilizations are a real threat. Like the attacks on democracy are a real threat. The banning of abortion in this country is a real present threat. But again, like these things didn't fall from the moon. You know what I mean? Like they didn't just like pop on earth. Like these things have been cooking for a long ass time. And in particularly like when it came to abortion rights, people were sounding the alarm that with the new orientation of the court that there was a real threat to abortion rights in this country. But even before that, we were seeing states like my home here effectively banning it, limiting it to like 6 weeks, you know, after conception. And it was Sleepy Joe when they had the power, when they had the mobilization, when they had the victory, when they had the mandate to say, we're going to reset this country from whatever the Trump movement represented. It was quiet. It was silent. It was complacent. And it's interesting to note what he's about to say is important about this time here.
When I ran for president 4 years ago, I said we're in a battle for the soul of America, and we still are. The question we're facing is whether in the years ahead we have more freedom or less freedom, more rights or fewer. I know what I want the answer to be, and I think you do too. This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for re-election. Because I know America.
This is the part I find. I don't know if you want to keep it rolling.
We can keep it rolling. Really... I mean, might as well give it a live take.
All right. Sorry, everybody.
I know we're good and decent people. I know we're still a country.
Oh, on that note, I just want to say real quick, like the MAGA extremists, and then the talking about this isn't a red or blue issue. No, fucking let it be red or blue. Say it's Republicans. It's not, and it's not like the guys with Trump flags, you know, on the back of their truck. It's the lawmakers that you spent your whole life like saying, actually, we can work with these guys.
Yeah.
Honesty, respect, and treating each other with dignity. That we're a nation where we give hate no safe harbor. We believe that everyone is equal, that everyone should be given a fair shot to succeed in this country.
Thank you for choosing us.
Every generation of Americans has faced a moment when they have to defend democracy. Stand up for our personal freedom. Stand up for the right to vote and our civil rights.
Like this was 2016, right? Like this is a time to defend democracy. It's like you were 4 years in power now. You got to be able to start pointing to what happened when we had that mobilization.
Yeah, I mean, you can't point to anything specific that he did to protect, say, democracy.
Yeah,
but be president. But he was be Trump,
president, and the other guy was not. Right, that's effectively what it is. But now he's back again.
Promised this time, yeah.
And so, the future is unknown now, right? Look, I mean, this is like gets, I think, to like some of the fundamental factors, not only of like Biden, not only Trump, but also I think a lot of the things that the left, like our side, is sort of like swimming through right now, right? Because not only is like there are all these threats, like life is getting more bleak for Americans. Americans are literally dying of preventable causes. People are dying from deaths of despair. And in fact, like not only is like the future being denied in the sense that like the politics here isn't truly, about winning any kind of future. It's like, we got to push back the threat to what we might've had 10, 15 years ago. Right. Which was not good. And like, not only is life getting more bleak, and like the politics of today are like denying the future and like political imagination of what a better world could be. Like for many Americans, literally like their life expectancy is dropping, right? So like things are like measurably worse off now for people than they were even going into the financial crisis of 2008, right? Which again, like goes to like some of these bigger pathologies. Like this was supposed to be the big shock to the system that was going to lead to these fundamental changes. And now there's like a pining for like 2007, right?
Which is crazy because, like you say, like what happened for 8 years before Trump?
Yeah.
That fucking meager banker first in line recovery that we had that led to all like the crypto scams and Silicon Valley banker bullshit that we're having to deal with now. I mean, where did Trump come from? I mean, look, part of it I think is like you don't want to gloss over the Iraq War and Bush administration and stuff like that, but like how can like you were in position to do the most and did the least.
I mean, that's it. And like, that's why it's, him saying complacency. This ain't no time for complacency, right?
Yeah. Why is that on your mind, Joe?
What is this grand narrative? This grand narrative does not match what's been happening on the political side since Biden has been president. Almost immediately, Biden comes into office and walks back their process of more stimulus checks, despite the fact that those were incredibly popular and helpful for millions of Americans. They back down from a fight with the Federal Reserve, which is like pursuing policies that are hurting everyday Americans. They made Trump's border policies, utilizing the racist justification for Title 42 to block asylum seekers from coming into this country, made it permanent, right? They're cutting food stamps for families. They're cutting Medicaid for young families in this country because Biden wants to say we did it, mission accomplished on COVID-19, right? That's the achievements of the past 4 years. Apart from that, right, you have something like the IRA, which maybe might be moving some money towards renewables, but is nowhere up to the crisis, nowhere near enough, or and on top of that, has like a theory of change of the state, which is that the state should take a backseat and let private interests continue to dictate how we do energy policy in this country, right? Those are that is like the legacy of this first term of the Biden administration. So it's not up to the task of beating the far right. Like I'm not even talking about like winning an election. I'm talking about like dealing with that as a political force in this country, because we've lived under 4 years of Joe Biden. And again, for millions of Americans, they've lost their right to get an abortion or to receive health care. You're seeing trans people across the country being threatened. You're continuing to see our life expectancy drop. And for millions and millions of working class people, their lives aren't getting better. They're getting worse. And I'm not trying to be too pessimistic, but this diffuse progressive movement, right, that really unleashed itself, really showed itself during the Bernie Sanders moment, right, which was honestly, like in a lot of ways, the antithesis of Joe Biden, right? Like that early moment was like something different is possible, a better world is possible, and we can come together and do it, right? That was the initial challenge, the initial attraction of the Bernie moment in 2016, especially. And what has happened with this progressive movement? Well, this diffuse movement is in equal disarray. From failures, for example, aside from Rashida Tlaib, to say no to Biden denying workers their right to strike, to this kind of stuff. And, we've criticized Jayapal and other members of the Progressive Caucus a lot on this program. But this is from Ro Khanna that I think really highlights the kind of the rod even in that movement that is trying to challenge some aspects of Biden's complacency. This is from a New York Times article. And this is a quote from Ro Khanna. Right now, the progressives are sort of building power. It's like a silent build that is just going to explode in a post-Biden world. I just can't conceive of a situation where progressives aren't dominating presidential elections over the next 15 years after Biden. Now, let's like unpack a little bit of that. Does a movement that is silent, right, that you're framing as silent right now, scream to you a grassroots, bottom-up mobilization of working people in this country? Or does it seem like more parliamentary maneuvers of a certain group of people who are in the halls of power who might want to sort of push policy maybe a slightly more progressive direction, right? Like this is something that is very far off from, for example, Bernie's political revolution to say, oh, we're building silent power right now. What that means is we got eyes and ears in important NGO boards. We got eyes and ears in important maybe White House briefings or inter-party meetings, right? Not something that is really representing like a power of the people, which what brought this entire movement into being, right? So you're seeing that kind of decline even in the rhetoric that is being used by progressives. And look, I think like you agree with me on this, Matt, that like it's not accurate to lump all of the progressives together. I think actually like a big thing that we try to do on this program is try to draw a line, for example, between maybe a Ro Khanna and a Jayapal and like the Squad, even though we have criticisms of them, understand that they even represent different representations of maybe a progressive or a democratic socialist movement, right?
Yeah.
But it's still not enough, right? And like one thing that's frustrating is like we try to make this point a lot, and we're not even seeing that coming from the people we're trying to make that point about.
I mean, this is pie in the sky when you die. A silent build sounds like you're making a gaming PC. That's not how power is done. Right? You build power by exercising it. That's it. And like I like this idea that we're like, oh, we're just waiting to do what, Ro? Exactly. Like once Biden dies, what? You're gonna do Medicare for all? like, are you fucking shitting me? No, that's not acceptable at all.
Or even like, again, like even if the intentions are to do some of these progressive policies, right, which I think are good and things that we should be fighting for and trying to win, but again, are also very different from like the direct confrontation with like the capitalist class that as a socialist I want to see happen. Even on that metric, right, saying you deny like the fight with capital, the theory of change here that basically, we're just going to have some people in power who are going to be able to do everything for us is wrong, even by the standards of the Bernie movement itself, right? I make this point all the time, like the not me us thing wasn't just like a cute flourish, but like was an argument that like we need a grassroots bottom up movement instead of a top down administrative state being built up. And I think Ro Khanna really does represent that more top down perspective on politics. But again, like this is getting to like these symptoms. What are these symptoms of? What is this Biden thing? Like, again, it's not surprising that Biden is running. It's not surprising that Trump is running. It's not surprising that the Republicans are doing what they're doing. It's horrifying. It's dangerous, and it needs to be defeated. But they come from the same deficiency that is endemic, I think, in American society and American politics, and unfortunately is something that's being experienced by our friends and comrades globally right now. Because here's the thing, we don't live in the end of history. And I feel sometimes we need like a new term for this at this point, because it almost feels ridiculous to be talking about Fukuyama's thesis from the 90s at this point, right? Because it's continued to develop and entrench itself. But what we're getting at, we're getting from the Democratic Party led by Biden is an attempt to return to an end of history style of politics. Despite the fact that life is getting worse, that polarization and division are increasing, the climate crisis is largely left unaddressed, and globally, politically, like the global order is shifting, right? The idea that like this is the time that we're just going to do little tweaks for people in power is like that has just been completely proven wrong by actually existing, experienced history. And this is, I think, the fundamental reality of like American politics is that we're at a time right now where the vehicles in front of us, the political parties in front of us aren't up to the task, the historical task that's in front of them. People have heard this probably before, but I got to cite it because it unfortunately still continues to speak to the moment that we're in. It's a famous Gramsci quote. The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old world is dying and the new world cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear. Now is the time of monsters. And there are monsters, folks. Trump has unleashed an already existing violence and chaos into American society that has been cultivated for years by both the Republican Party and by the Democratic Party. Because while both of these parties represent different interests of capital, both different interests of the ruling class, and also different fractures within the petty bourgeoisie, even some members of the working class, what both of these parties are interested in doing is managing and limiting democracy, because those things are direct threats to their rule, right? And all these parties have done, in my lifetime at least, has been have been to try to find ways to ride the frustrations and the worries and the anxieties, in other cases like the bigotry and the hatred and the divisions that are baked into the society, but try to ride those in ways that don't fundamentally shift the reality for working people, or even how American politics are done. Look at some of the horrors that we're seeing from the right now on like the trans issue and on schools across this country. In this case, on the trans issue, it is trans people's humanity and lives and teachers who are under assault. It's also a very clear attack on sociability, like the social world itself, the interpersonal relationships, the relationships that we have with one another, with our community, with our society, the border between the private home, the family, and the public, the community. That's what a lot of these school board fights are about. That's what a lot of these things are about from the right. You see this from the general attacks on trans people in society, right? Because that just mobilizes and motivates people's hates and bigotry that they have, on books for children, in the case of vouchers or school choice, assaulting public institutions that we all sort of experience collectively. It's about limiting that interaction with the social into these kind of controlled environments, right? That the whole charter school, private school thing is to say, like, I want to pull my kids out of society at large and put them in a group that's probably wider and wealthier than the rest of American society at large, right? Mm-hmm. This right-wing mobilization we're seeing right now is dangerous, antisocial, and it's certainly bigoted toward the LGBT community. But this is the kind of thing that has a lot of veracity and mobilizing potential when the political world has effectively imploded, right? People feel more political than ever, but their actual ability to like affect material change on the society, the world around them, is limited. The right has found their solution to this problem by saying, we're going to take people who have some semblance of power and agency in society, and we're going to just wage war on people who with less power than me, right? Like finding that bigotry and hatred that is latent in American society. Let's unleash that so that people can wage war on the cultural Marxists, on the trans people, on the teachers, on all these kind of institutions, right? It's bad. I'm not denying like that bigotry is real and exists, but it's also like the right is able to take advantage of this because of the general decline, the stagnation in American politics in general, in my opinion.
Yeah, I want to I think the reason the Democrats as a party aren't competent to really, they're not really able to follow through the logical endpoint of what they're defending. So like with trans people, for instance, we all agree we shouldn't victimize trans people, but should the state guarantee their health care and their ability to follow through and provide as much assistance as possible? The same thing with abortion. We all agree we shouldn't oppress women. The state should be making sure that all of this care, and up into including like what we talked to with Dominique Remy about like the full like needs of mothers in order to be mothers, and like those sorts of it's hard to say like, oh yeah, you should have a right to an abortion, which is not like a nasty thing women do, but medical care, right? Like how can you argue for one small sliver of this based on a moralistic reason when we say like, okay, we're going to make sure you have access to all the rest of it through the marketplace and through these different tax incentives? It doesn't compute. And that's why we continue to spin our wheels and just sort of dreamcast about like, oh yes, look at Biden riding to the not being complacent chair. It's like, where the fuck has he been for that? Because we all know that they've taken a route of complicity when it comes to something as basic as making sure people have the right to vote.
Yes. No, I mean, absolutely. And like, I think for people who watch this program regularly, we make this point all the time that like, we agree, for example, on the threats to democracy. What is being done about it? I mean, hell, even in the case of what happened in Tennessee recently, thankfully, there were mobilizations on the local level that did something about it. But where was the federal government when you saw like a state like Tennessee basically trying to invalidate democratically elected representatives? Where's the Biden administration when my governor has been, in my opinion, illegally, according to the Texas Constitution, mobilizing the National Guard, spending billions of dollars to run parallel border operations to the United States government? Border policy, immigration policy is not a right of a state governor under our system. It's not a power that is given to the governor, both by like the national federal constitution or the state constitution of Texas. And you have seen our governor here seize that power for himself with very little pushback from the federal government, right? In a way that is damaging for immigrants, is damaging for border communities, and is damaging for Texans at large in the nation, right? These are the things that are so frustrating, is that there's this lack of action. And again, like, the point here is that this is baked into the cake, because this is a fundamental aspect of both Republican and Democratic politics and policy right now, is trying to speak in rage and mobilize people, without, offering fundamental changes. And and the right does it in just like a pure chaotic, violent way, right? They just like, we're going to unleash angry parents on school boards. We're going to unleash angry folks on trans people, right? The Democratic Party, they get worked up and they talk about it internally and whatever. But like, again, like, the final call is like, you just need to vote harder or vote more or whatever the fuck the solution is at this point. Honestly, frankly, even beyond that, is like, not even like even just the voting. Like, a lot of it is just like, feel good about the shit that you've been doing for the past 30 years and feel like you don't need to do anything different, right? Feel better than the other people, that it's not your fault. You're not a part of this problem.
Yeah. You know what's so funny about the Ro Khanna thing is, like, literally the Clintons, remember what their campaign theme song was?
No, you had to remind me.
Don't stop thinking about tomorrow. Don't. And it's like, it is just on repeat, slowly echoing, getting more and more reverb. But yeah, don't stop thinking about tomorrow. That's just what the Democratic Party has been putting on.
So this is a fundamental point. It's like, look, it's not surprising that Biden's running. It's not surprising that Trump is running again. It's also not surprising all of like the consequences of both of their political approaches and opinions and desires of what they want to do with politics, right? These aren't surprising, but they represent a fundamental rot, I think, that is American politics right now, where people feel more and more that this isn't working for them or their families or their communities. And the avenues for action are either limited, foreclosed, or are, in the case of, for example, like the right, are just sort of pushed into, waging war against your neighbor. But I hate to do this, but I think we have to. Like, one, it's like you have the wink and the smile from Biden, where he gets the problems to mask his inaction, and to the triumphant barbarism of Trump. People are angry across the board and they want to act, but everywhere the ability to act in politics is either denied, mediated, or directed into pure hatred and bigotry. But even on our side, on the left, like, we have real problems too that are equally, in my opinion, a reaction, a symptom of the same kind of fundamental rot in American politics. And we have to figure out a way to do better. Like, on the left in the US, like, compared between like 2016, 2017, and 2023, for a lot of people, in my opinion, the idea of the future has been evaporated. In a few years, we've moved from popular ideas, from like the electoral project of Bernie Sanders, things like the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, higher unionization rate, to even like the more radical, and like, you can make the argument more utopian, or have criticisms of it, but it was a utopian sympathy. It was a utopian idea. Things like fully automated luxury communism, saying the future is bright and we have to fight and win it. This, in the large part, not for everybody, but in the large part, has been replaced with cynicism, from things like degrowth, which is just trying to put a positive spin on climate austerity, pessimistic third worldism, right, which is rejecting not just the possibility, but the importance of building a strong socialist movement in the United States, or in a lot of the political and social isolationism of online vampire culture. I have to say it, searching for reasons, missteps to excise, cull, and limit the already small movement that we're in. The end of history politics, beyond its kind of inadequacy for the moment, is predicated on this idea that the world as it is sort of it. And we can just maybe make some, if you're a liberal or member of the Democratic Party, maybe make some tweaks around the edges. If you're a rightist, try to find ways to wage war on some of the social progress, but keep capitalism in place. And in the left, unfortunately, I think more and more, there's just a kind of general cynicism where we recognize that things are bad, but we also are just as incapable of action as the liberals and the right are. Is becoming too much of, I think, of like a common pop wisdom about politics. There are exceptions, and I'm very thankful for them. We've seen incredible mobilizations. We talked about them on the show. But when we're talking about the excising and the kind of vampire mentality, if there was an attempt to hone and focus maybe a larger movement that was appearing on the national stage, that'd be one thing, right? If there was an idea that we need to hone the left in this country to be able to act, that'd be one thing. But unfortunately, there's little connection between the left as it currently exists right now and the broader working class movement. And beyond just like the lack of mobilization, in fact, I think the worst examples of this have been the failures of the left to even show up and support actually mobilize working class struggles. Again, there are exceptions. I'm not saying this is everybody, but it's not enough, right? The mobilization is not enough. Like you saw, for example, the railroad strike. You saw what happened in Alabama with the longest strike in Alabama history. The inability of the left to be able to show up for a lot of these groups, I think, is a real indictment of what we're doing. And I'm not saying this to say give up or become cynical or even start continuing to like attack and cut at each other, but rather saying we need to look inwards and say, what are we doing right now that's not working? Why are we not capable of showing up for the things that I know we all support? Right? Where is this lack between the intention, the willingness, the recognition that the system is fucked up, and action? Because here's the thing, from Trump to the Democrats to even our movements, the fundamental reality that American politics exists in a space where people realize things are messed up, but they feel their abilities to act are limited or denied completely, is creating all sorts of morbid symptoms in American society. This world is going to continue to move forward in some fashion or another, regardless of our capacity to enact our will upon it, to enact our movements upon it. And we can't just sit around and lick our wounds. We have to continue to push ourselves into effectiveness, into a movement that is actually winning victories for working people, or sit back and let this kind of new mobilization of an NGO elite consensus, like what Ro Khanna was describing earlier, that wants to inherit all of the mobilization, the excitement of the Bernie Sanders movement into itself. We have to figure out a way to do better. And we try to come up with some of the answers, but this is a collective project, and it's going to really take not only us recognizing the problem, but getting serious about the hard and oftentimes tedious and unglamorous work of doing something different.